Welcome, everyone. Today we have another episode of the Balance and Empathy Show. I am Titia from the Netherlands. We are here together with Rena from Western Australia and Ashok from Canada. So, globally divided we are. Now, if you are watching, please let us know where are you watching from, because we always want to know where our followers are based. Today we have such an interesting topic that is very close to my heart. Today, we talk about bridging the gap between empathy and leadership. And I think this is very, very important in today's leadership that we show more empathy to be able to connect more to people, to connect better to your team, to connect better to your other leaders, your other managers. I think it's crucial to create that good working atmosphere where everyone feels connected and everyone feels safe. Now, Ashok, preparing this show, you told me you have written an article about this topic. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this.
Thank you, teacher. I think human beings have been around for quite a while. We've actually been on the planet for about 300,000 years. Bipedal species, which means that we stand on our 2 feet and our arms are free. And the biological advantage of our arms free is 2%. But the reason why our arms are free is that when we have our babies, they're helpless. And because our babies are helpless, and they're helpless because their brains aren't developed yet. So actually human beings are born underdeveloped. So we have to carry our young. Isn't that an interesting idea, that we have to care about our young and carry them? Many other creatures, when they have their baby in the wild, is that the baby can't stand up and walk within 30 minutes. They're on their own, and they're usually prey. So empathy starts right away, where we have to be concerned about the helplessness of our children. And then moving forward, I think we experience leadership issues with our parents. Our parents are the first leaders that we have when we're children. And we don't think of it that way necessarily, because we're just children. We don't think of our parents as leaders and that we're the followers like in the corporate world. But if you really think about it, that if that goes well, that experience in your family home, your childhood with your parents, it's likely that your sensibility of being led or taking instructions from authority figures when you become an adult might be a little bit easier than if you had a terrible experience before. Now, I do talk about 2 types of leadership, but I'm just going to leave it there and let you guys chime in for a bit.
Thank you so much. That's actually really interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but yes, growing up, you do experience a type of leadership which comes in the form of guidance by your parents, and if that goes well, you have, I think, a very strong basis. And I think empathy is a big part of that as well. But if it didn't go well, it really can affect you also in your life as an adult and in the type of leadership you show in your work, in your personal life, towards your family and children. What's your take on this, Rena?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're both saying, and that's a wonderful analogy that you bring to the table, Ashok. I think about a baby Joey in its mother's pouch, and the comfort that it has there, and the way that its mother brings it up. It's very supportive and nurturing and nourishing and loving. But you're just going back to a child, we often refer to people as role models. And that's where it all comes about. And, when we have loving parents and we're brought up in that environment is so important to us. And quite often, as children, we talk about our teachers. And we have that relationship with our teachers, So I think it extends from the parenting to the education system, where we have that thought process. And I know a lot of people that say, oh, I remember the first teacher I had. So I think, empathy goes back to those days from the beginning of time, our parents, and then through our education system as well.
Well, it starts off with our needs. And so if we're looking at a child, especially a pre-verbal child, maybe we're on an airplane and there's a baby crying, everyone's wondering, what does the baby need? what is the inexperience of that child, so that the parents or anyone who could be helpful can attend to that. And if you think of empathy as the capacity to sense the inner world of somebody else, or the needs of somebody else, or the feeling state of somebody else, or the thoughts of somebody else, which is the idea of empathy, it really starts really, really young in life, when we hopefully have the experience of other people wanting to be able to sense our inner experience. And if you take that forward to the workplace, for example, and you're working in a big company and no one cares about how you feel, no one cares about how you think, no one cares that you have work is making you feel poorly, maybe because of the toxicity, then you're stuck. You're someone who can't cry out, because that in itself would be seen as a problem. So this is why I think it does start early in our life.
And I should just on the point, how do people know that someone else is actually listening to them and showing empathy?
Well, you know if somebody's empathizing with you because you feel safe, and that there's no end to how much they will listen, or there's no depth that they won't go to listen to what you're trying to express. I mean, what's interesting too is that human beings have been on the planet for a while, but we've only had speech for about 50,000 years. So for 250,000 years, we just had grunts and gestures and movements to express everything that we could, like other animals. And so I think the idea that we have language to really sharpen up our description of what we're experiencing, it does help, but sometimes it doesn't help as much. But the answer to what I think you're saying is to actively listen to someone when they're describing and expressing something, and you listen with your eyes and your ears. Because when you're looking at someone's facial expression and they're saying, you know, I'm fine, or if they're saying, I'm fine, you have to have a connection between what you're seeing and what you're hearing as well, and then ask that, well, you don't look fine. Can you go deeper than that and tell me more? And that's how someone might be testing you to see if you're truly interested in what they're feeling on the inside.
I think that's well put, Ashok, and I think asking the right questions is really essential there, because often people have these shallow conversations. How are you? I'm fine. Okay, bye. You know, make a connection and ask the proper questions where you really connect and you really learn how someone is actually feeling. Is also a way of showing empathy, I think.
Right.
Now we have a comment coming in, a question by Teresa Richardson. Hi, Teresa. Thank you for watching. She says, love the analogy. Leadership is about nurturing and guiding, and about managing goals and the bottom line. For leaders that are great at nurturing are often not great at performance management. What's your take on that? Well, for me, from my experience, I can say it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I think when you work in a team and as a leader, you are good at nurturing, you also must make sure, you know, what are your KPIs, what are the goals that need to be reached. And I think when you are a nurturing leader, showing empathy, those leaders are often very good at using the talents that their team has and sharing the responsibility with the team. And that makes sure that as a team, you feel together responsible for the goals. And I think empathy can really boost those results. What do you think?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you, Tisha. I think that if you are a nurturing leader and that you're demonstrating the care factor, you won't need to performance manage. Simple as that.
Exactly.
I think it's also really important to make the statement that empathy doesn't necessarily mean nurturing. So, you know, I used to work in the hospitals. I used to do some very painful procedures on people when I was a medical doctor, and I'd have to stick a needle in them, or a needle in their bones to do bone marrows. And you know, that's not nurturing. That's painful. And what my technique was to walk the person through it, let them know what pain they're going to be experiencing, but we had to get the job done. And the other analogy is teaching a child to ride a bicycle. The child actually learns when you let go of the bicycle, even though you know they're going to fall. And so the idea that you have to hold on to them because you can't let them fall and be overly nurturing isn't actually empathizing with their need to learn how to ride a bicycle. So empathy doesn't automatically mean that you're clinging and that you're tolerating poor performance in the workplace.
You're giving them the opportunity, Ashok, to become resilient.
Exactly.
And to have courage.
Perfectly said, Rena.
No, exactly. And I think, trial and error is also a big part of it. And I wouldn't even say error, I would just say attempts, right? So allow people to make mistakes, learn from that, and then move on. And I think that often when we make mistakes, we learn the most because we don't want to repeat that mistake, right? So allow people to make mistakes, coach them into approving them after that mistake and trying another time, and really trust your team into doing the right job for you. Now, Kishore is saying effective communication is lacking nowadays. Well, I think that depends, Kishore, on the organization and on the leaders that are there. But I think empathy in leadership is up and coming, but I think it definitely needs work, and we can do a lot more in this. We were before the show together talking about what we now see happening in the industry. Some industries actually make leaders, also in the medical profession, take empathy courses. And this makes sure that they know how to show empathy, that they know how to apologize and how to acknowledge the problems that people are having. And this, especially in the medical profession, can make all the difference. And I know, Ashok, you talked about doing your medical studies in the 80s. You really faced a lack of empathy there. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No. Yes. All right. Okay. It was, I loved learning to become a doctor. It's a long journey, but it's an extremely fruitful journey as far as emotionally, to give you the gift to be able to help people. I mean, that's the gift of being a healthcare worker, no matter what branch you're in. So that's my gift, is I get to help people. But I think what happens sometimes is that, how do you teach someone something? And I think the best way to teach somebody something is to motivate them to want to learn more, as opposed to making them frightened if they don't know more. So there's motivational based learning and fear based learning. And I also talk about this elsewhere, that there's two basic types of leadership. There's motivational leadership using empathy, and there's narcissistic leadership where you bully and manipulate and lie and force people to service you as the leader, but really they're not that concerned about their followers. And I think that when we have that motivational based empathic environment, and there's actually quite a bit of research on this, people work harder if they're in a safe environment. And they're actually performance statistics, if you look at them, whether it's in hospitals or in corporations, where you're working with an empathic team. And in Canada, I work with a lot of businesses and business leaders who hire me to help them with some empathy issues in their companies. And I can tell you that the companies that are happier are more productive. The companies that are miserable are not as productive. I mean, that sounds very simplified, but it's actually very true. And I think when people feel that they have an empathic leader who is firm, not soft, but firm, but empathic, they work really hard. It improves trust and loyalty, motivation, and it's a general safer working environment. I'll leave it there.
And what it does too, Ashok, from my experience, I found that it helps people become more empowered. So I think that's really important for a leader to do, to help people in that environment progress into next roles and to acquire more skills.
But I think what you're saying is even more powerful when you take it a little bit further, because the leaders that we have get replaced by the leaders by the people that are following them. So leaders emerge from the tribe in every generation. If your leader was a good role model, when it's your turn to be a leader, there's a much greater chance you're going to be an even better leader. And that you just look at the history of schools, for example, where kids going to school where I got strapped, as a child, that you never see that anymore. So once you see the eradication of these kind of bully techniques with leadership and putting in empathic kindness, firmness, you don't have to be sloppy about being firm, but at the same time being kind and empathic. Again, learning is much easier and the performance levels are higher, but we're all role models to each other. That's what I'm kind of pointing out here.
That's exactly it. I think that's beautifully said. We are all role models to each other. And I was thinking about this topic too, preparing the show. And often a motto I have in wherever I work is, if you treat people the way you want to be treated, often half your work is already done. If you treat people with respect and dignity, you empower them and you acknowledge them and you hear them, then you can build great relationships, in a safe workplace. And think about it, looking back in your own career. I remember my top 3 leaders I worked for. I learned so much from them. There was never any bully technique or manipulation there. These were great leaders who were supportive, who used my talents, who acknowledged me, who praised me, and that made me to what I am today. I always think back about working for them and how much pleasure I got out of that, also from an educational part, but also feeling pleasant in the workplace. So for me, that's such a big win. And bullying leaders, I would leave immediately. For me, that's not a place to stay. We have a comment from Gift O. Thank you for watching. He says, great discussion. Empathy is crucial for people performance, and that affects output at workplace positively. Well said. Couldn't have said it any better. Thank you for your comments. Rena, do you have any top leaders that you've worked for that you really remember that shaped you to what you are today?
Well, I'd like to talk about a conversation with I had a meeting with a leading person in Western Australia, John Paulson, and John was talking to me about a book written by Richard Barrett. And one of the things that Richard says in his book is that leadership is all about having the wisdom, compassion, and the foresight to build a sustainable future for humanity. And I absolutely love that. So the leaders that I've worked with have been outstanding, and they've had that as part of their compass. And that's really what's helped me to be the person that I am today. Outstanding leaders. So thank you, John Paulson in WA, for introducing me to that wonderful book. It's called A New Leadership Paradigm.
Oh, amazing. Well, let's put a link in the comments after the show so people can learn more about this book, because we are all about educating people. And I think coming back to the part about teachers, absolutely, when I think back to high school, for instance, you have these teachers and they can actually make or break how much you like a certain course that they are giving, So I had the worst teacher for geography. And I never picked that to graduate in because I didn't like him, right? And then I had this fantastic chemistry teacher, chemistry, and also for biology. And so those were a couple of the main topics I graduated in high school because, well, actually also the interest I have for the topic, but also because of them, they inspired me. And I think being a leader, you also need to be an inspiration for people. People look up to you if you have a certain position. You need to be the good role model and you need to inspire them, to be the best version of themselves. And obviously show empathy and notice when things are not going that well. Talk to them, notice it, and really make them feel heard. I think is so very essential.
I think you're also implying another issue that can happen because you can get into a great job situation where you actually really love the job, and then suddenly management changes and you have a leader who's toxic. And suddenly the whole job changes the flavor, the sensation, and you start to become mentally or physically run down and burnt out because of that. So I think you might even have a job situation where it may maybe not the most glamorous job, but you may have great leaders in that company, in that organization, and you love your job because the people and the emotional environment. So I think what we need to emphasize, and I think we're already doing it, is that there's something about the people and their capacity to lead with kindness and compassion and to be empathic that makes almost any work environment much more bearable. Even if you have to go to war, if you respect your leaders and they're treating you with empathy and kindness, something as egregious as that situation becomes at least more emotional, tolerable, and manageable in the moment.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then the question is, when you are in that kind of situation, management changes, and suddenly you are faced with the type of leader that does not show empathy and is actually like toxic. How can that leader change? How can that leader learn to change? And how can we help that leader?
Well, clearly, Tisha, that person's quite unhappy. Ashok talked about 2 types of leadership styles. So if someone's coming to work and not motivating people, clearly they've got a problem. And, people need to try and help them through that issue. It could be a relationship issue at home. And what happens is they're bringing it to the work environment, which is not fair for the people that they lead. So it really needs to be nipped in the bud. It can't be tolerated, It's not other people's responsibility because they're not feeling good. And no one should break another's spirit because they're not happy and feeling fulfilled. So, it has to be addressed. And either the people address it through that leader obviously reports to someone, to a board or the executive. They need to show examples of what's going wrong. And they just shouldn't tolerate that behaviour in the workplace. Those type of leaders. Yeah.
Well, we did touch on this a bit earlier, and sometimes that certainly happens in the Canadian banking system where I might work with a client who works in a bank who has a bad boss, a toxic boss. What sometimes happens is that there's a certain kind of person who gets promoted in these corporations because they get the job done. And they get the job done in part because they don't have feelings. They don't have remorse. They will cut heads and heads will roll and they will fire people and they don't seem to have that much concern for it. Are they miserable people on the inside? Probably. I mean, I also help some of those people and some of them are very miserable. They don't have emotionally satisfying lives. And I think they take it out in the workplace. But I think that this is a corporate cultural issue that we're kind of talking about. If a culture allows those kind of people to come into environments and make them more toxic for everybody, including themselves, then that's a systemic issue as much as an individual issue. And if that person can get the help, and the entire corporate ethos is around it being a safe place for everybody, you can actually get better results with an empathic type of leadership than that kind of brutal, remorseless kind of leadership that might have been much more common in yesteryear. And one more thing, just to be a little bit topical, is I think a lot of the shift has happened because more women are becoming in leadership positions and they're making sure that there's a more empathic, compassion, and kindness flavor in the workplace than the old kind of boys' club of we don't want anyone who's weak or can't get the job done in this company. If you can just add that too.
Yeah, you make a good point, and that's where the consciousness is being lifted. They're really being awakened, which is really that coherence is so important. Very good point.
That's so true. That's so true. So it's kind of a shift actually that is going on, and I can only applaud women getting leadership positions. I still think it's too low, right? It needs to be
absolutely
much more than
low.
it is today. So, but you see a rising line, and that's quite positive. Namonye Yemina is saying empathy should deliberately be included in workplace staff development at all levels, but more especially at leadership level, because that is where the highest empathy is required. Yeah, I agree. I think, but actually at all levels it's needed, because if you have a coworker next to you where it's very difficult to work with and there's no empathy or no bad communication, that's quite difficult. But yeah, if you then go to your leader or your manager and there's no empathy there, then there's no option to resolve that issue whatsoever, besides leaving your job. And that's probably not the first step you want to take. So yes, agree, Namon J. Thank you for your comments. Another comment coming in from Churillo Anyar. I hope I pronounce everyone's name okay. Apologies if I don't. He says motivation is the more important thing that the leader should impose in their leadership strategy and style. I think, yes, motivation is absolutely important. Inspiration too. But I still think empathy is the most important, because without empathy, how can you connect? How can you understand and really feel those people and what's going on? Do you agree, Rina or Ashok?
Well, I think it's actually quite complex, because you can motivate someone by fear, to get them to do something that they would never want to do, simply by threatening them. And we have too many examples of that in history, where people have done horrific things fearfully. Or you can motivate people through desire, and making sure that they get a reward. And the reward might be long term; they may not get it immediately. But I think motivation, empathic motivation, is extremely powerful and very useful. But we need to be sure on the style of motivation, because we can get people to do all kinds of things if we motivate them for the right or the wrong reasons. And I think the right reasons to motivate people to do the right thing is the right thing.
And to your point there, there's a lot of people in the sales environment who have budgets that they have to achieve. So if they don't achieve those budgets, they could be performance managed. Now, the key thing here is sometimes they're actually not responsible, or they don't have input into those budgets. So that makes it really difficult. It's a very difficult situation where you're asked to perform and produce X result, but you don't have input into that. And that's how you're KPI'd.
Well, to just use some old research by B.F. Skinner, who put pigeons and rats in boxes, he discovered that the most powerful way to motivate someone or something is intermittent reinforcement, which means every now and then you give them a reward. The weakest way to get motivation is through punishment, by actually hurting something. Negative reinforcement, which is taking something away to increase the likelihood of a behavior, like taking away a child's toy so that they behave better, that works that reasonably well. But intermittent positive reinforcement is the most powerful motivator, and that's helpful to know for companies as well.
Absolutely. I actually remember Skinner's research from my studies too. So it's so very interesting. It's so interesting. Gina Shaw has responded. Gina, thank you so much for watching. She says, thank you for this. Such perfect timing. This is exactly what I am up against in my workplace. I recently took on a new leadership role and I am becoming more and more drained. I needed to hear this as validation, as what I am feeling is real and change needs to happen. Thank you so much, Gina, for your comments. I'm so happy this is helpful for you. I would say if you have any questions, please put them in there. We are happy to help you. Even if the show has ended, we can always go back to the comments and try to help you. So thank you so much for your comments. Another point I was thinking about, COVID, people working from home. It might not always be that easy to show empathy because people are now less connected. What I'm noticing, so many people do everything by email. So many people's inboxes are exploding with emails, right? Because everything is done by email. And so, like how we are talking here today, video calling, we can see facial expressions. So then we can listen with eyes and ears, and that helps. But still, you do not feel the same thing as if you are in the same room with someone. You don't feel the exact same energy, in my experience, right? In my humble experience. So I think that is something that needs to be taken in account for in now the new modern workplace, which is partly in the office, partly from home. At least that's in the Netherlands where I live. That's how it now works. People 50% are going to the office, but still 50% they work from home. So I think people really need to realize, if you want to show empathy, you really need to connect to people. If you are in a team and this new coworker is starting in your team, working from home, then in the office, and then from home, make that person feel welcome, make that person feel included, right? Show that empathy and imagine yourself in that position, coming into a new organization from your home office, right? And it's very challenging to get to know your organization because you're not wandering through these office halls anymore. You're not standing next to the coffee machine anymore, right? So I think that is something not only leaders, but everyone in a team needs to take into account to make sure everyone feels included. So I think in that sense, COVID really showed us empathy is more important than ever. Wouldn't you agree, Rena?
Absolutely. Usually with new employees, you have an induction program. So I think we really need to tweak that to make sure that everyone demonstrates empathy and takes time to reach out to that new person and make them feel comfortable and transition well into the new family and understand the culture and contribute to the culture of the organisation.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
just using the COVID situation, Tisha and Mina, empathy often requires you to understand somebody's experience from their point of view. So if someone is going through something, like if I'm a doctor and I'm working with someone who has a disease that I've never had, how could I possibly empathize with them if I've never had that disease? Well, it doesn't actually work that way. We have to empathize with things that we haven't experienced ourselves. COVID, on the other hand, has been a worldwide event. And so suddenly we have a common place of reference that the majority, I was just on airplanes recently, and I was on airplanes with people in different languages, different cultures. We all seem to know what to do. We're all mindful and respectful of each other's space, the fact of masks, the fact of our passports, etc., for vaccines. And it's kind of a new situation where we have a common reference point that can actually bring us together rather than push us apart. I'm really interested post-COVID to see if that feeling, that sensibility of commonness and commonality carries through to make us feel more connected as human beings to each other.
Absolutely. Well said, Ashok. Deborah Robinson is asking, great insight on motivation. Any tips on inspiring? Well, let's all three of us give a tip on how to inspire people. I'll start. So for me to inspire people, I try to do that with my content on a daily basis on LinkedIn. But like in the daily workplace, I think it's very important that you walk the talk, you know? So be an inspiration to people, be the right role model. If you want to have a positive work environment where you inspire people, be positive, right? Come in with your sunshine smile in the morning. Good morning, everyone. What a fantastic day. Let's get to it, right? And really create that positive atmosphere. That is something that I think works very well in inspiring people. Rena, Ashok, what's your tip on inspiring?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn every day as well, 6 days a week at least. And what I like to do is I like to actually acknowledge what people are saying on their posts, Tisha, and give them great feedback and praise them and thank them. And for me, inspiration is actually also showing gratitude. And I display that, in the way that I engage with people on LinkedIn. But where I have physical contact with people, I praise them for what they've achieved and for how their attitude is so positive, and so all those great, beautiful behaviours that resonate with me. I give great feedback, and I smile a lot because I'm generally a happy person. I wake up in a good mood.
Good for
So
you.
I'm able to inspire and show my feelings to people, which has a very positive effect. Just smiling at someone is such a beautiful thing because it brings such a wonderful reaction. So
Wow,
a smile
absolutely.
with inspiration.
I'm
Smiling
going to
is
agree with
contagious, as they say.
I'm going to agree with what you're both saying because I think that they're lovely comments. So I think praise is key in inspiring someone. But the only ad I would give is to ask the person the degree of difficulty that they had to go through to achieve something. So someone shows me something, and I say, "Wow, great job," and that's validating that moment. But what about the moment they had to go through to get to that moment? And was it easy or is it difficult? It's kind of like labor. If you say, "Oh, great job, you have a kid," but you don't say how was the labor. Again, I've never been through labor, but I think understanding the degree of difficulty, the degree of struggle, the pleasure of the struggle, if it was something that someone's working on in the corporate world, for example, but also the suffering of the struggle. And if you empathize with what someone had to go through to get to a moment where they've produced something, they're going to be much more motivated the next time to do something that might have been difficult to do, but they've come up with this production. So that's my ad.
Well, it might not
Wow,
be so
fantastic.
hard the second time around, Ashok.
Sorry, I
You know,
didn't catch that, Arena.
it might not be so hard the second time around.
Well, that's
As it
what I'm trying to say. Difficult things and struggles become easier the more
Yeah.
you practice the struggle. I used to be a figure skater, and I got to the stage where I was doing sort of axles and these kind of jumps, and then your figure skating coach would brutally say, "Well, the moment you've got one done, you've got to do the next level of difficulty. So you have to spend the next 3 weeks on your bum warming up the ice because you fall all the time. You fall to learn how to do these jumps." But if I had motivation, like doing a really good job, I know it's difficult and you're struggling through it, I would do anything to please my figure skating coach and try and land that jump. And that's why the degree of difficulty, I think, is important to acknowledge as well.
That's well said, and I think the second time around, practice makes perfect, right? So, but like not for child labor, as I have given birth to 5 children, I can say it's different each time. So,
Yes.
that's, so okay. But on another note, Dr. Aaron is saying, "Thank you so much for watching again, Dr. Aaron. I remember you also from our previous shows. Happy that you're watching." He is saying, "Yes, time to time nudge." I think that's a great point, by the way. Time to time nudge keeps the driver awake and assists to keep going, and so does inspiring notes help. Thank you, Titia, Rena, and Ashok. Thank you so much, Dr. Airborne, for that great analogy. I think it's those little great analogies, right, that really help us understand things much, much better. Thank you for that. So I think we have come to the end of the show. I hope everyone watching it was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will try to get back to you on that. Thank you all for watching, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you all again. We 3 of us look forward to seeing you all again in another 2 weeks. See you then. Bye-bye.